Okay. Thanks to Mia for inviting us. I'm Phyllis Odyssey. I'm the Director of Horticulture for Randall's Island Park. This is Unyang Sabasco. She's the Horticulture Manager. And Nick Storrs is our Urban Farm Manager. So I'm just going to talk very briefly, just an overview about where we are in the world and about how big the farm is. And then Unyang is going to talk about the inspiration for why we're growing rice. And Nick is going to get to the nuts and bolts of the whole business. So we are in a New York City public park, but we do not work for the Parks Department. We are not city employees. We work for Randall's Island Park Alliance, which is a nonprofit that administers the park, and that nonprofit raises all the money, pays our salaries, etc. Was that okay? And this is basically what I just said is our mission, the organization's mission. We are an island in the East River. We are part of Manhattan. That is our zip code. You can get there over the Triborough Bridge or a walking bridge, for those of you who know Manhattan. But we can see the whole skyline of Manhattan from the island that we're on. The farm, this is all of Randall's Island, which is half the size of Central Park. The farm is 1 acre, maybe a little bit more. And this is just some statistics about what we have growing. We have a little apple orchard. We have 72 raised beds, etc. 4 rice paddies, 15 chickens, and a bunch of thematic gardens as well, and a very low-tech outdoor kitchen. This is a schematic of the farm. And here, the whole purpose of the farm, since we are a nonprofit, we are not trying to grow anything commercially. Our only mission is to teach. It's a free program to any kid in New York City. So it's just edible education of big variety. So the 2 things that people ask us is the kids actually harvest food usually at the farm, and they make some kind of a salad, a kale slaw, sometimes pesto. And so people always ask us, because the farm is very productive, what do we do with the food after the kids have used whatever they use in class? And basically, we've done 2 things. One, we give it to a very small soup kitchen run by a bunch of nuns that are a couple blocks away from us, which are not supported by the city. And this year, we're involved with something called Drive Change, which is a social enterprise which takes kids, ex-offenders, and they have a series of food trucks. They have a chef. They teach the kids how to cook, and they use local food. And so every Monday they come, and if we have eggplant, tomatoes, whatever we have, they take, and then they figure out what they're going to make for the week. Then we have some partnerships which have helped us a lot in the rice project. The Japanese consulate has been very, very supportive and has helped us in terms of bringing people out from the consulate to work with kids and be at different events. Grow NYC, which is a huge organization in New York, which is involved in all kinds of community gardens, school gardens, composting, recycling. Momofuku, which is a very well-known restaurant in New York, which has also sent chefs. And the Malati Farm, which is Davide, which is right there, who has been with us for 2 months and has given us Italian rice seed and has come for almost 2 months, day in and day out, and worked with the kids, which has been, and cooked risotto every single time, which has been great. And we also have great friends who are interested in the rice project. So there's Davide, Yoshi, Mihan, and also some of the owners and people from the restaurant that Malati has in the East Village called the Risotteria. And Tea Master Suhiki has also come, and Nick will talk about that a little bit later, about how she's been involved in the Rice Festival that we have at the end of the season. And we have actually gotten a lot of press, and one of the reasons to love New York was that we're growing rice, so that was kind of a fun article. And here is
So back to the slide that, as you see, we're getting really good spotlight in New York City. Not only the New York City, other state that is very unique project we've been working on it. So I'm gonna briefly explain how I got into the project. So I think I have a different background as you guys. I'm not a farmer. I'm not a scientist. So I have a trained landscape architect in Korea and Japan, and now I'm here for horticulture field. So back to 5 years ago, I have a question about what's the sustainable gardening practice. So I was just start digging up the couple books, and it ended up that this book came out, and it was written by Ezzy Brown. It's English says just enough. So this story about it, Edo appeared in Japan before they opened up the Western culture. It's a couple hundred years ago, and it's a story about how they live, how they manage it, house or field and forest, all the detail that had innovated design, even that get into the Western culture. In one chapter, it shows how they prepare the rice paddy, captured me to, oh, this is very interesting that maybe I can do it. So I called up my grandmother, who's a Korean. She's Korean, but later I find out that she grew up the rice paddy. So how we start, I had to just, it's not, I know the season has a lot of resources, of plenty good research, but I had only this book and my grandma's advice. That's how we start. So I asked Phyllis, can we start it? Rice paddy. So why not? So I went through all the step by step on the illustration. How do they prepare? How do they sow? How do they transplanting? And also they shows you how ecologically help in rice paddy in the environment. And also in the last chapter say, how do they use the byproduct? So it's no zero waste to use the rice. So this is basically based on the book and my grandmother's advice, how we did it in a year. So this is March. We collect the recycled bricks in the island, in the park. So we built up basically man-made pond. And I'm sure Nick's gonna show you how we propagate it and transplant it on this. In November, we start cutting it and hang it on outside. But shortly after, we move into the inside because we start having problem with the bird. Then this is a rice dressing day. Like she said, we have a partnership with the Momhook restaurant. So chef and other employees that came out, they participate in the program with the school groups. So they dressing it and milling it and then winnowing it. I'm sure he's gonna show you winnowing basket. So they had a really great time later in November. Then that following year, Nick was joining us program.
That's right. So good afternoon. So I sort of inherited this project to some degree. Came in after the first year when everything was up and running, and what was great is it worked the first year, so I knew it could work. This is sort of very brief, just where we are and how we're growing. So we're in New York City. You can see kind of between 3,000, 3,500 growing degree days, our latitude, and part of the inspiration for this was realizing that we are on a similar latitude to North Korea, and that might give us a chance. So we are growing in raised beds rather than sort of forming in-ground beds. And the way we've done this is leveling a portion of the farm, laying out that first course of cement blocks kind of as perfectly as we can, as levelly as we can. And then we've been lucky enough to have a lot of volunteers, corporate volunteers who come out to the farm, who want to be involved and help out. And so you can see them over here on the far end, and they are, right, and they're the ones that kind of built it up from this stage to a finished product. So you can see we've taken painter's tarp, Really, it's just the cheapest stuff we can find at Home Depot. But it's about 6 millimeters thick. We line the patty with that and then fill it with compost. This is a Neil. This picture is a Neil right here. Watching somebody else work while giving the thumbs up. But then we kind of, to make it look pretty, we edged it with bamboo. What we do with the kids is we're propagating in little plastic cups and then setting that in a greenhouse, or using the empty rice paddies with plastic over the top as sort of a hothouse. We've been transplanting in the beginning of June, and we correspond that with the lesson. So the kids are involved in that transplanting. We'll take a little bit of a closer look at that later on. This is some of the transplants that we did last year, so we did it in 50s. Here's some of the kids putting it in. And then we add fish to our patties as we keep the water level up during the growing season. And then we've been harvesting in October. So these, up until last year, we've been growing just Koshi Hikari. And then this year, we've started working with Mia's rice panel to bring in some other varieties that way. And then also the Malatis have been generous in donating some of the Violone Nano and some of the Carnaroli rice that they have. So this year we got a whole spread, which is cool. Which will probably make the harvesting a little bit more erratic, I guess. A little bit more complicated and kind of timing that. But so far we've been draining the patties middle of September and then harvesting in October. Here we go. And then we hung it up to dry, and like Eun-Young said, the first year it was all hung outside, and we and the birds learned that we were also growing rice and came for a visit, and so we had to move it indoors. And now we're doing most of our drying indoors, and then we process it. And so we're using, this is our winnowing basket that Eun-Young brought from Korea, right? Yeah. And this is awesome. This is very cool. And we've been using a mortar and pestle, and like 40 fifth graders. And that's the real key. And you can see the guys at work right here. If it's a little bit hard to see, I think, in the light, but this room, so this is all done indoors. We're doing this in November, early December. The whole room is lined with plastic, because this takes practice. And yeah, and so we do a good deal of sweeping everything up and then doing it again after. But it works pretty well.
Is there music?
There's music. We yeah, we did have Spotify out there going hard last year. Right. And then so that's sort of where we are and like the tools that we're using for this program. But the goals of the education program are sort of what's most important here. And what we really want to do is make sure that the farm is drawing kids into a better understanding of where their food comes from, how it's grown, and then ideally how to eat better, so that this kind of affects change throughout their life. We also want to prove that an outdoor education is worth it, is a viable place for kids to spend learning time. This can be difficult. It can be hard to prove to a principal that sending kids to a farm is not going to make them do worse on standardized testing. And then our other goal is, I mean, when I first came in, Phyllis, Eun-Young, and I sat down and we were sort of talking about the program and what we want to do with it, and really made the decision that what we want to do is reach as many kids in our neighborhood or in New York as possible, and that there's a lot of demand for this. That a lot of kids have no contact with where their food's coming from. So as a result, our program focuses on essentially like a field trip style of education. So kids usually come once, sometimes, especially the summer camps, if they keep going back to the summer camp, they'll end up coming a second or third time. But the program is really designed to reach kids in one day. So the way it's set up is that kids usually come to the farm. We schedule it between 10 and 12:30, 1 o'clock usually, because the public schools get their buses for free during that time. So this sort of works into the idea of the program being a free program for schools. We want to make sure that it's accessible to all the schools. When the kids come, we do an introduction, do a little bit of a walk around, and then usually break them into 3 or 4 groups depending on how large the class is. Usually we get about 40 kids at once, but we only want to teach 10 at a time. 10 is kind of the high end of what we want to deal with, because otherwise we start losing kids. Right. And then the kids break into 4 different groups. We do 4 different activities. And so every 20 minutes, 15 minutes, the kids will rotate activities. So we don't have a lot of time to get into depth about some of these issues. What we do try to get into depth with is we do try to hit on a couple main topics. And one of them is biology and science. And this goes into making the, proving that the program is a viable place for kids to spend school time. So, right, we do everything from anatomy to root growth to biomass growth. And, right, we'll keep moving and we'll run into it. We also want to introduce culture. So we're introducing a lot of East Asian culture. Davide has been working a lot with the kids on Italian culture, and then also their cultures that they're coming out of. New York especially, so diverse that, I mean, a lot of these kids, their parents or even the kids themselves grew up, say, in Arkansas, in the southern United States, and that many of the foods that we're growing in the farm are sort of touching on those cultural heritages, no matter where they're coming from. This is Suhiki is doing, she's braiding with the rice stalks, and so we're introducing culture that way, and we'll see it a little bit later on. And then another important aspect of it is nutrition. We want the kids to learn to eat better, eat a more varied diet, eat with a little bit more intention, not just put food in their mouth and swallow, but think about the food that they're eating, enjoy it, and therefore eat better food. And we also want it to be age and ability adaptable. Please notice the milk crates down below. So what's interesting and makes it a lot of fun for me is a lot of times these kids get off the bus and I have no idea what I'm about to get. I know the grade that they're coming from, but the level of food literacy is really different. And so almost immediately we start kind of feeling out, where are they? What do they already know? What can we build upon? Or do we need to go right back to basics? And right, a carrot is a root, leaves at the top, you don't eat the leaves, you eat the bottom. And then in order to make it more viable, we're starting to try to play around with scope and sequence. I think is New York specific, but Common Core standards are starting to be a national standard. And we want to make sure that the lesson plans that we're following are aligning with these standards so that when teachers do want to come, they can go to their principal, they can go to the superintendent and say, look, this is a viable thing. This is worth sending our kids to. And that also makes it more open to more kids. It's often the most financially strapped and impoverished schools that feel like they can't justify doing anything except for sitting in straight rows reading because they need to get their test scores up. And so one of the main ways we do this, and one of the things that we really got out of the scope and sequence and Common Core standards that we're bringing into and incorporating throughout the lesson, is the ability to observe what you're seeing, what's in front of you, really take a look at it, and then describe it. Pay attention to those details, pay attention to how you're thinking about it, pay attention to the conclusions that you're coming to, and express those to others. And so a lot of what we're doing is trying to get kids to express what they're seeing so that I don't know, these are skills that are applicable all across the board. But the farm is a great place to do it. And the rice paddies specifically are a great place to do it. So we teach with propagation. These are the kids propagating in our cups. Right. Compost, water, seeds. And again, we're talking a lot about what are the needs of the rice, what are... why we're doing this in cups. Notice the snow on the ground. This is April. And so we talk a lot about, right, the temperature needs, why we're going to bring this into a greenhouse. What does the greenhouse serve? What purpose is it facilitating? Also having fun while we're doing it. And then, so we, right, and I think most of you know, right, we're propagating in April, we're in a greenhouse for about a month or so, and then we're transplanting in June, and transplanting starts to introduce a lot of cool variables. We have a little bit more to look at when we're planting. Kids are breaking apart the kind of the root ball and seeing those roots at work and what role they're forming. So we've got anatomy at play. The kids get to do a lot of the work in the farm, and being hands-on and being active in the farm is an important part of it. Here I'm using twine to lay out the rows in an attempt to get straight rows. It works pretty well. It also works well to get the kids to plant, stand up, take a look behind them, and say, do you guys think you just did a good job? You know, I mean, you know what we're looking for. We're looking for straight rows. Was your row straight? Did it work with all your buddies next to you as they were planting? You know, I mean, somebody might have been straight, but if everyone else is wonky, you need to make sure everything kind of fits together. But evaluating their own work and either correcting or just appreciating it is an important aspect of this as well. Here they are at work right now, putting in the transplants, and this is over a couple years. And so I think this is from last year. Yeah, that looks like from last year. So we're still using some of the flats, and then again, getting the kids to actually take a look at what they're doing, observe what they're doing, explain it back to their friends, explain it back to me. I mean, all these are important aspects of the education. And then, right, we also want the kids just to kind of get dirty. This kid is being pushed by his friend to actually touch the water. So many of these kids are just afraid to touch anything dirty. And right, I mean, they've had 13 years of education not to touch dirty things. And getting a chance to break that, to say, no, if we're going to learn about this, you need to go in elbow deep and do this, is very cool. And then usually once we get all our hands in, planting is no problem. And it's fun, and it's an activity they get to do with their friends, and an activity where work gets done with their friends, and they get to look back and appreciate that work at the same time. Right. And then what's neat is here we're adding goldfish. These are, again, super cheap fish. These are the feeder fish that we use to give to like octopuses to eat. But we're adding these to the paddy and really starting to introduce the idea of the rice paddy as a whole ecosystem. So what are they seeing as elements of that ecosystem? How do those elements support each other? How do they work contrary to each other? And getting the kids to pay attention to this and pay attention to the details that might give them the clues to those answers is a really important part of this.
Did you try adding the octopus?
I did not add an octopus. It's, yeah, it,
This would be an interesting part of the experiment. I've never seen an octopus
I know.
rice paddy.
We have chickens, and I feel like that's as much livestock as I want, and the octopus didn't really come into play yet. But again, looking at these reciprocal relationships, how the fish support the rice. They're pooping, they're fertilizing, they're acting as pest management. They're starting to eat some of the insect larvae. They're starting to eat some of the mosquito larvae that might prey on us. But then the rice also supports the fish in turn. It provides shade, it helps even out the temperatures, and it provides protection from predators. We lost a lot of fish when we first put them in, and the rice is nice and small, because one herring can walk up our paddy, which is, I don't know if I said it before, I didn't say it before, it's 3 feet wide, 30 feet long. So it's a tiny little thing, and we've got 4 of them. And that's sort of just wide enough that if the herring walks up the middle, he can kind of strike at the whole paddy. So we saw a lot of fish with no bellies afterwards, but we kind of keep adding fish to it, and that itself is an important lesson, that as the kids come onto the farm and see dead fish, that those fish are decomposing and thereby feeding the rice, but they're also feeding other animals in the whole ecosystem. And really want to introduce the idea that the farm is primarily a managed ecosystem that produces for people among everything else, among the herrings and stuff. Now we have bird netting, so the herrings are out. Again, we want this to be hands-on. We want kids to see, feel, taste, touch, be involved with the farm on all sensory levels. So the kids are the ones putting the fish into the rice paddies. That is Brianna. It took easily 45 minutes of coaching to get her to touch the fish. But again, only 45 minutes to break down 14 years worth of education. That felt good. And again, and part of teaching with Habitat is we're introducing things. We've got lily pads, papyrus, other aquatic plants as well as the rice involved. Snails, snails are always part of the game here. So we're looking at things like invertebrates versus vertebrates inside that ecosystem. And then actually this is a poster that the Mulattoes used back in Italy, and we took a crack at translating. And so this is many of the animals that we find in the Italian farms. And what's great is that with the illustration, we can start looking for many of these animals here in our New York paddies. And then we start introducing sort of the rest of the growing season. And so, again, what we're trying to do is get kids to start observing, paying attention to the rice as it starts to head out, find where the rice is just beginning to head out. Sometimes they catch it before I do, and that's a good thing. Feeling, again, using all of those senses. So we're not only standing back and watching it, but we're putting our hands in it, we're feeling it. The rice, especially the Koshi-Akari, has that really classic feature where it's very smooth when you kind of pull along the rice blade, the leaf blade, but then as you push against it, it's very rough. So it's got that dentate structure to it. And it's kind of introducing kids to sensory surprises like that. It's not what it looks like. And that you don't understand what it is until you not only see it, but you touch it, but you smell it. All of that is important. And then telling it back to me. What are you feeling when you put your hands in there? Talking to their friends about what they're feeling, especially what they're tasting. Some of them, taste sweetness and bitterness that I'm not. But paying attention to what you're tasting is important. Here we're all paying close attention. And then part of it, and this is probably the hardest part for me, if only because we have so little time with each kid, but it's important to give the kids a chance to discover it on their own. To not lead them into exactly what they're supposed to find, what I want them to find when they come, but to give her the space to poke around and discover what she finds most interesting about the rice. It's hard for me not to talk, and that's that's what I need to do in those circumstances. I need to recognize when it's happening and stand back from it. Maybe talk to the rest of the group while I let one just kind of do her own thing. This is actually a fantastic illustration of the other benefit of doing the rice paddies the way we do. She can get her nose right in it and see it, smell it, touch it, without being in mud up to here. Her parents probably very much appreciate that she didn't come home with 3 pounds of soil on her. And so this style of paddy works really well for an education program because it does allow you to get that close to it. More kids paying attention. And that's sort of what I don't get to teach enough, and what I would in some ways like to teach more of, is the development of the rice. The kids don't get to come back once a week, twice a week for the whole growing season. In many ways, this is one of the reasons why we're trying to act as a place, as a resource for schools, so that they can bring these ideas, these paddies, back to their schools, and kids can have that long-term proximity to it, or long-term, can pay attention to it over the long term. Here's some in flower right now. And then what's very cool, especially now with Davide in the farm, is he started to bring back all of the levels of processing the rice. So what the kids are looking at here is a bowl full of the paddy rice that was harvested last year, a bowl full of the rice hulls, a bowl full of the brown rice, the refined white rice, the kind of the broken grains from the refining process, and then some of the rice flour. And this, as well as like the bran and the green grains. And this is very cool because even if the kids don't get to see that take place over time, they still get to see it all in one spot. And so we start to talk about that process of turning what they're seeing in the field into something that they see on their plate. In the end, we do want to kind of bring it all back to their diets and what they're actually eating. And so what's great is that when we're teaching, we're also able to incorporate a lot of chefs in the farm. This is a group on the left-hand side that was working with a pretty amazing sushi chef named Yoshi, who came up, and he's doing rice balls wrapped in nori. Is that right? Oh yes, I'm moving, I promise. So Yoshi gets to cook with the kids. The kids get to do a lot of the cooking under advisement from a really professional chef. Here's Davide making a bowl of risotto. It's a lot of risotto. It's awesome. And so the kids can eat what they're seeing in the fields. This is Midori, who's working with some fermented rice bran. So we're also starting to incorporate culture through the food as well. And then this is Mihung working with 2 of our high school students who were making spring rolls. And so, yeah, these are the proud chefs. And then we get to teach for the harvesting. So the kids are involved in all aspects of the rice growing. So they'll help us harvest. They help us evaluate when the rice is ready to harvest by squeezing the grains, making sure they're plump, making sure they're ready. You can see the development, so the grains on the very end are mature first. And trying to catch that at the right level of maturity. This all comes back to paying close attention, to observing what's actually going on and describing it to others. And then after we harvest and after we dry it, we get to have a big rice harvest day. And so the kids will get to see the rice as it's harvested, and they're the ones helping to strip the rice. They grind it with a mortar and pestle. Yeah, here they are. This is amazing. If you can get 40 kids to do your rice processing for you, strongly recommend it. And then they're using the winnowing baskets to winnow it. And so what's really cool about this is they're really starting to stay here for a moment. They're really starting to connect with kind of that traditional culture of how rice is being processed. What we also want to do is start introducing ideas on how rice is processed kind of more on a commercial scale, so how the rice that they're eating is often processed. So this is just a diagram of a basic, what is it, roller huller. And so actually from last year, you guys might remember, this is Don Brill and his bicycle-powered huller. And I saw that and greed just jumped right at me. And so over the winter, we talked to Don about building one for the farm. And we did a Kickstarter campaign to raise the money to finance it. And so here's our rice huller at work. And so the kids get to be on the bike, hulling the rice, seeing this process go. Don did a great job of incorporating a lot of plexiglass panels into it so that they can watch the rice fall through the machines. They can watch how that process is working. And then with all of the bits and pieces kind of very visible, very exposed on the side, we can trace how the work of rotating the pedals moves through the machine to move rollers at different speeds. It's very much so an engineering lesson. It's very much a cultural lesson and a nutrition lesson all at once. It's very cool. And then this fall, when we do our harvest, we are going to use, this is Ken Green. I don't know how many people know Ken. He's the, if he's not in charge, he's one of the two guys in charge of the Hudson Valley Seed Library. He's in charge. Yeah, I'm gonna give it to him. And so what they built for their, this was at the NOFA conference last year, NOFA New York conference. And so the way that they process some of their seeds, because they're working on a smaller scale, is this is a seed column where they drop the seeds down through the top funnel, attach a shop vac to this side, and it sucks the hulls out as the seeds are falling down through. So this is how they're cleaning their seeds, and we want to build one as well. And again, with a plexiglass front, you can see this process happening, and the kids can very easily understand what's involved in taking something from the field and developing it so it's ready for their plate. And then the idea is that they will be able to see this happen. They'll be able to play with this and talk about what's similar about it, what's different about it. This requires a lot more skill. And is that a good thing? Is that kind of a problematic thing? I mean, is it great that just about anyone can stick the shop vac in the top there and make that machine work? Or that this is something that takes practice and can take, I mean, right, you see somebody who's been doing that for 30 years and it's beautiful to watch because it's just so smooth and so efficient. Right, and how do we compare them? And is it worth comparing them? Can we have both? Which is very cool. Here's kind of the layout of all the whole process right in front of us. And so with any luck, this fall, when we do the rice processing with the kids, they'll kind of be involved from going from the patty rice on the far upper corner down to refined Carnaroli and Violone Nano. I feel really good about the Violone Nano just headed out, so I'm really excited. The Carnaroli, I got my fingers crossed. We'll see what happens. Right, and then taking that rice and being able to work with professional chefs to present it to kids is really cool, is super awesome. And Yoshi and Mi-hyung both do a great job of that. They do a good job with the kids. This is Suhiki Mori, and I'm sorry for the iPhone blurry photos, but she was able to introduce a lot of sort of the culture that surrounds not only eating rice, but the culture with sort of all of the rice products. So she's taking the rice straw, weaving it into rope. What's the name of the rope? There we go. my tongue doesn't do it very well, but being able to make that rope, to understand the importance of it and understand the importance of using the entire rice plant is very cool with the kids. And then comparing it to Italian rice and Italian culture. Right, this is an awesome risotto pot. I mean, it's like waist high. It's so cool. Weighs a ton though. Bringing it in and out of the closet is a pain. But so Davide has been making usually very basic risottos, but like a basil risotto and a mushroom risotto. And that's really so that we can make sure we include as many kids in it as possible. We're afraid that if we include meat or include something that would have an allergy in it, that kids would get excluded. And it's a lot of fun to work with Davide. And then it's also fun to incorporate adults too. So most of the people coming to the farm are between kindergarten and 6th grade. I can do 6th grade, you go much over it, you start playing with hormones. Yeah, 6th grade is fun, yeah. But again, we do a lot of high schoolers. We usually have high schoolers come on during the summers as interns, so they get a little bit more in depth with the rice. Our intern right now is amazing, and Julia is the one who's chosen and marked all the rice that we're tracking for the rice trials. So getting her to do real science is very cool. That this is not just, I mean, she does experiments back at school because those are the experiments you're supposed to do, and everyone knows what results you're supposed to get and all of that. But doing the real thing where you don't know what's going to happen is very cool to involve kids with, and I think really inspiring for them. But adults too. It's also really inspiring for adults. So we get to do, not nearly as often, but get to bring adults through the farm to take a look at what's going on. This is actually a group of professional horticulturalists through the Metro Hort group. And as we were just talking about, I mean, some of this rice is so ornamental. I mean, is this something that could be incorporated into gardens as well, even if it's not eaten? I mean, there's a lot of things to play with and a lot of different reasons why people are interested in it. And then we're sort of, where do we take this in the future? So we definitely want to include more cultural aspects of the rice. I mean, everything from tapas to include more of that Hispanic culture, to using fermentation, to the usu and keen, which is the mallets over here. Pickled bran. There's so many different, there's so much rich culture centering around rice, and bringing kids into that culture or reconnecting them with culture that they're coming from but have been disconnected from it through a move is very cool. And then sort of the patties themselves, we definitely want to do more trials, and we're having a lot of fun playing around with the different varieties, and we're always interested in what could work next. I think the raised rice paddy itself presents some interesting opportunities. I mean, what will happen if we paint it black and it's absorbing more sun? Does that allow for an earlier season? Does it burn it out and kill it? I mean, who knows? And then, could we build something like a hothouse that would just fit over the top of the patty, and being able to see what effect that would have on rice as well. From the programming standpoint, what we really want to do is codify and start sharing our rice lesson plans in order to help schools grow their own rice back at these schools. Give something. So many times we have teachers that just feel like, I would love to have a school garden, but I have no idea how to grow anything, therefore we're just not going to. Rather than treating it as a chance to experiment with their students and learn how to grow with their students. But kind of giving them some of those lesson plans, giving them some of the basic, how do you propagate rice, and where do you put it, things like that. If we can provide that resource, that would be great. You want to speak about this, or? Can I
No,
speak?
that's our message.
And that's our message. That I mean, what we're really trying to do with the farm is educate, inspire, and innovate. Ta-da! Look at that.